This
We're
hangout is
live.
on live. Doing it. Cheers. Hey, let's have a little toast.
Cheers.
It's Judy Blume Book Club and Brunch. It's like being 15 but better.
Because we can drink.
Yeah.
Legally.
Well,
I didn't drink when I was 15.
neither did I.
Yeah, then what about you guys?
Neither did I.
Drinkers?
Oh.
Two guests at the table today. Larissa at Marga Pictures.
Hello.
Right? Krista, what are you? At
At
Krista?
Funny Lady 419.
At Funny Lady 419. We're all on the Twitters. I'm Pop Goes Alicia. Who are you?
Just Jana.
Just Jana. Just Jana. That always reminds me of Jewel of the Nile. Remember that movie with Kathleen Turner? Just
No.
Joan. Just Joan. You remember that? Nobody remembers that? We're my pop culture people. I hope you're in the internet. Whoever can remember that, tweet me. Hashtag I'm not crazy. I know movies from them. That had to be late 80s. Well, so we're here today. Jana's in town from Sacramento where she does a True Story, a live lit show, which you can also follow online. And she's the publisher of Under the Gumtree magazine, underthegumtree.com. Okay.
Yep.
And they're always looking for submissions, creative nonfiction.
Yes.
Does it have to be creative?
Yes.
Boring nonfiction is not accepted.
Not accepted.
Anything else? Did I forget anything else?
That's about it. I mean, I have a co-working space also in Sacramento
Oh,
called
right.
Think House Collective,
Think House.
which I run with my husband. Oh, look, your mom is chatting us.
Mom,
Mom.
please invite me again. All right, how do we do it? Now I don't even know how to. Kay, let's say that first.
Okay.
So, I'm gonna keep doing this. Can you figure out how to invite her?
Yeah, I'll try.
Okay.
See if you can.
Go maybe this page. All right, so we are reading 3 of our favorite Judy Blume books. They look backwards to me, but not to the people at home, right?
Right.
Okay. Jana's the tech savvy one, which is hilarious because you're not really that tech savvy, but you're really good at figuring things out. So, Jana and I.
What is that, like a backhanded compliment?
No, but I mean, it's not like you like build websites or like.
Well,
Can
kind
you?
of I do.
Oh.
I mean, WordPress.
All right.
I mean, underthegumtree.com, janamarlease.com, thinkhousecollective.com. Those are all websites that I built. Thank you very much. Woo!
STEM. Women in
there.
tech. Girls in tech.
Your mom is here. She figured it out.
I did figure it out, Jana.
And Chris.
Hi, girls.
Mom's here. She's listening. All right. Mom's here. I'm chewing. What's happening? This is
What else
happening.
has happened? Who's joining us?
Hi.
Hi.
You're just going to listen for now. Hi.
Yes, I am. I'm listening.
All right. Great. So glad to have everyone here. Can we make that stop? Or it doesn't matter. It's only when she's talking.
It's only when she's
All right. So Jana and I grew up on the Jersey Shore. We have lots of fond memories of summers together. We're cousins on the Jersey Shore, and Judy Blume is from New Jersey,
right.
which we didn't really know. We were like, let's do Judy Blume Book Club because it's adolescent lit. We love her. And then we were like, no kidding. She's from New Jersey. Go figure.
And all of her books are set in New Jersey.
Right. So
What?
we started with starring Sally J Freedman as herself. Larissa. So let's talk about Sally J Freedman is Judy Blume says one of her most autobiographical books.
Yes.
So a lot based on Judy's character. It takes place in the late 40s.
Late 40s, just after World War II.
On the Jersey Shore. Well,
But
sort
she
of.
takes a trip to Miami.
They relocate to Miami. And not saying anything.
I forget what I was going to say.
So what you really liked about this book you were saying was Sally's character is constructing stories in her head to help her like cope with things. And one of the things she's coping with is they're a Jewish family and they relocate from northeastern New Jersey, Jersey Shore to South Florida, which is really interesting because I had that same experience growing up. But I was in middle school. I was a little older than Sally.
Right.
Just a little bit.
Right. Yeah, so Sally is this really imaginative little girl. She's in 4th grade, right?
Yeah, 4th grade.
And she is forever making up stories in her head. And there are these, like, adventure stories where she is the hero. And she's doing all of these bold, courageous things. And what's really fascinating, I think, is she casts herself as the hero in the stories that she makes up, I think, because she doesn't feel that way in real life.
She's kind of the underdog. Like, she's got this older brother who is kind of good at everything. And just for the time period, you know, the girls and boys had very different roles in the household anyway. And they've moved to Miami because the brother was very sick.
Right.
And so they wanted to be in a warm climate. And the father has stayed behind. And so there's sort of this working class Jewish family. And they have relatives, like very close relatives who died in the Holocaust.
Yes.
So Sally has this whole fascination with Hitler too.
Mm-hmm.
And so in her fantasies, she like goes after Hitler.
She full on confronts Hitler himself.
Yeah, like, and we were talking about how she, because of her youth, you know, she's like a 4th grader. She has this innocence of thinking that like she could have access to Hitler, you know, that she could just be walking down the street and be like, hey, and then Hitler was across the street and I totally went up to him, you know? Which I think is super empowering. And we were talking about how Judy Blume is very subversive in her writing. You know, she has these feminist messages that aren't exactly overt, but if you know the patterns we have about characters in whether it's film or television or literature, which really began, even in the way we construct news stories, we don't always see women as being empowered, and especially something like being able to fight off this huge cultural kind of bad guy too, you know, like it's really saying, you know, that this little girl was thinking about the world and thinking about how the things happening in the world affected her, and she wasn't afraid to participate in taking some action against it and against the injustice. And we don't really describe heroes that way. I mean, last year with the Oscars, they just did a hero montage, and they barely showed any girls. And of course, they showed like Katniss and maybe a couple X-Men, and these are all great and empowered hero characters, but they also follow this same pattern of being a hero by fighting or dominating, or instead of, you know, making some kind of change or using your mind, or even this idea of being creative, and in your fantasies, you're you know, fighting people or sticking up for people.
Right, and beyond the hero story, Sally herself is just a character who's questioning the norms. So she is experiencing this discrimination as a Jewish person and wrestling with, like, okay, well, why did the Holocaust happen, and what's this deal with Hitler having this thing against Jews? And then in her everyday life, there's still a lot of segregation in Miami. And there's a scene where she and her friend are at this store, and they go get a drink out of the water fountain, but it's the colored water fountain, and they get in trouble. Like, there's
by a colored woman.
No, wasn't it a white lady? An older white lady who says, don't drink from that fountain, you'll get their germs.
Oh, I think I misread that sentence. But yes.
Yeah.
And there's
and don't let your mothers know, like, don't get caught drinking from that fountain too.
And her dad is a dentist, and so then she asks her dad, like, you know, because you're a dentist, you must know, do their mouths really have different germs?
Yeah, she's like legit.
Smart.
Yeah,
it is.
she is. She's very smart. She's
very
extremely smart. And that's what she's curious. And you don't really see her get in trouble for it, which is good, but you do see her kind of going through and processing a lot of stuff, I would say, kind of on her own.
Right.
Because like even one of her girlfriends says to her one time, like, Sally's like, oh, you're making a joke, right? Because the girl was being sarcastic. And the girl was like, oh, Sally, don't be dumb. And she was like, I'm not. Like, it was kind of, she's still at this, like, innocent place of discovering and understanding, but she's totally curious and asking.
Right. Like, the part where the aunt gets pregnant, her aunt gets pregnant, and Sally wants to know, the adults start talking about an addition, and she doesn't know what they mean by that.
Oh, right.
So she says, what will the addition look like?
She's trying to like ask questions that don't show that she doesn't know.
Exactly.
You know, she's like,
And then my favorite part was she asked her mom, how does a woman get pregnant? And the mom is like uncomfortable, doesn't want to explain.
right.
And so she just says, well, the man implants the seed inside the woman. And she wants to know, well, but how does the seed get there? And the mom won't.
All great questions.
The mom won't answer. So the mom gets her a book.
All right.
And she writes a letter. Before she gets the book, she writes a letter to her aunt. And she says something like, I'm so glad Uncle, whatever his name is, got the seed planted.
First of all, now this is going to be interesting, and we've got my mom here. Did your mom get you a book? No. Gianna had more. Well, my mom, you got us a book. Do you remember?
Yeah.
You can talk.
Yes. I remember. Can you hear me?
Do you remember what it was like to share it with me and Pete? So I have a brother who's 3 years younger than me.
Oh, I don't remember the incident you're talking about. I just remember getting you the books.
Okay.
I remember she was your favorite author.
I don't really remember the moment either, but I remember the book and the pictures and like flipping through it. And then Jana had a little more of a...
Well, it was
you mean the moment of that. I thought you meant a Judy Blume book.
No, like the...
Oh, no, I remember the moment, and Peter was there.
Okay.
Yeah, I just copied what my mom did.
What did she do?
She got some kind of catalog how-to book. You know, like that character on Glee where she always pulls out a pamphlet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had one of those, and I just said, you know, this is what you should know, and I went through it like a storybook. If a person does this, then this is what you should do, and you know, if he does it when you're not married, then this is what you should do, and you know, I just went through it. I don't know what Peter was thinking because he was really young. I figured if I hit you both at the same time, then I wouldn't have to do a mommy-boy thing. But I did have to do a mommy-boy thing when we were in Florida.
All right, well, that's another podcast. So we'll definitely do that one too.
Right.
But this is the first time that I heard that she was in Miami, which is interesting because I live in Florida now. So
right. Yeah, and it's a different culture. Well, what I was going to say, just to add on to the innocence of the sex talk and whatnot, she starts writing letters to her friends. Right, so she hears someone tells her something about Latin lovers are the best, and now she's got this idea of like a Latin lover in her head.
She wants to know where Latin is.
Right. And then, oh my God, this is my favorite part. I totally forgot about it kind of. She's writing letters to her friends, and she's seen a babysitter or something writing a letter to her boyfriend, and who signs it love and other indoor activities.
Other indoor sports.
Yeah, other indoor sports. So she's writing a letter to like her girlfriend in the same grade as her, and she signs it that way. You're just like, I think even later in the book she sends one to like her grandma or an aunt, like love and other indoor sports, and she has just no idea. She's like, I like the way it sounds. But yeah, so there is this. Well, one of the themes, obviously, in all these books that's about adolescence is growing up. And so just this idea of what growing up looks like to girls specifically, because these are all female-driven stories. And, you know, Krista was saying before when we were prepping and making breakfast, she was saying how you were, like, obsessed with like being girly. So this like idea of being a woman had this very specific look. And in this book, there's a character that Sally gets to meet. Her dad has made an acquaintance with this kind of like East Coast, probably one of our uncles.
Yeah.
Like, this sort of like East Coast, hey guy, you know, come on, we're all friends.
And he's a stockbroker.
Right.
So he's like got all this money.
And he's like, you know, dinner, bring the whole family, and he's got this girlfriend that Sally is just like, because she's in the like low cut silk dress and she's got the diamond necklaces and she's got the beautiful 40s wavy, she looks like a movie star, you know, and
that's what I was obsessed with
yeah,
as a kid.
Yeah.
I wanted all of that.
Yeah.
And my parents, no one told me to be that way. I just was that way from the age I could watch movies and see girls had boobs and dresses.
And that's who told you to be that way.
That's true. The movies did.
Yeah.
But
but I chose to like that.
You're saying your family.
Like that's what I was struck by.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think sometimes that's pretty common too with a lack of heavy like traditional female presence. Like if your mom wasn't super into things like that, and certainly at that discovery age, you are like,
oh yeah. I mean, my mom grew up as a tomboy, and so my upbringing was not girly at all. And I always had short hair, and I was like dreading the day. We'll get to this when we talk about Margaret. I was just dreading the day that my period was going to start.
And I was looking forward
and
to
we were
it.
looking forward
I was
to
so
it.
excited.
Yeah, yeah.
See, my mom was feminine. She certainly wasn't a tomboy, but they just allowed me to like what I liked and just kind of grow up in the way that I wanted to grow up.
Right.
So,
yeah. Right.
Yeah, I was obsessed with my period starting.
there will be lots of period talk.
Yeah.
I think like for me, like it was different, and this is one of the themes in the book too. And I think, and I mean this comes up a lot too, but I had a brother that I was really close with, and my parents were divorced, so our sibling dynamic I think was different than some people's were. So he and I were really close, and growing up, we did a lot of the same things together. Like we would go out and play wiffle ball on the street with the other neighborhood kids, but we would also, like, our family was very into musical theater, and we had an aunt who was on Broadway who I was kind of obsessed with. But my brother and I would also sit around and like sing songs and do little shows for our parents, you know, so like it felt like we had this just sibling connection that
it wasn't boy girl.
Right. Yeah. And then I got my boobs, I feel, kind of early, and I wasn't like, I was still in the head of being a child, and I got this like, started becoming like sexualized kind of before I really knew what it meant. And it's funny, I just did a show where I did a story about this, and I have a show Monday night, Chicago, Snub Fest at Zany's. And I think I'm going to do the same story. It's like my boob story, and yeah, so I think that like
you got your boob size quickly.
Yes. And people noticed and commented.
So you didn't grow into your body. Your body just went, woof. God bless you.
Yeah, that's how I roll, guys. All or nothing. In it to win it. No boobs. And then when I was 19, I was like, let's cut these suckers off. But we'll get to that too. But no, so that whole relationship to womanhood, I think with girls especially, is very much attached to our bodies. And I know boys are too. I just think it's in a very different way. And then as we develop, it's all still, I feel, rooted in a lot of what had happened or what happens in the adolescent period. Yeah. So should we move on? Move on. Sally J, we're done. All right, so next we read, we're going to save Margaret for last because everybody kind of has this relationship to Margaret, and we'll talk about that. So the next one we read was Tiger Eyes, and I hadn't read this one. You hadn't read this one. No. So we hadn't read this as youths. Have you guys? And I hadn't read Sally J either, and neither had you.
I had.
You had. And a lot of people I've talked to read Sally J, so they had a relationship with it. Tiger Eyes was my favorite, and Jana knew it was going to be, and everybody knew it was going to be.
That's because Davy, the character, is basically Alicia.
Well, 14-year-old badass. I'm going to cry. Like, it just, one thing I'll say is also, the writing and this story reminded me a lot of Sarah Dessen, who's a contemporary author out of North Carolina. Y'all should follow her and look into her stuff. And so I think that's another reason. That's a lot of what I've been reading recently, so it felt really familiar. But yeah, like, so I could say why I like it. You could say why you liked it. Why you thought.
Summarize the story.
So for one thing, it starts in Atlantic City, so it's definitely Jersey Shore. And there's aside from what people see on TV now, there's a really authentic population or demographic at the Jersey Shore. Like, I mean, these are beach people who just like live on there are people that live on the shore year round, you know, and so especially Atlantic City. So it's like this beach town. But it's also kind of one of these fringe towns where like it's not rural, it's not city, you know, and I think that's a different experience. And I think a lot of New Jersey is like that because you're around a lot of the big metropolitan areas. But then, like, New Jersey's the Garden State, right? You know, I mean, like, there's roaming pastures in it. So this is definitely a beach town, and Davy's father has just been killed, fatally murdered. They own a convenience store, and he's been shot to death. And you don't know her relationship to the killing right away. Well, we can talk about story arc, but anyway, so she has her mom and her little brother, and they decide to go to New Mexico to stay with the dead father's sister and husband. And they're in this area, is it New Mexico? Or
New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Yeah.
They're in this tech valley, basically, where they build bombs and weaponry, like, for the government. So, meanwhile, Davy is 14. She should be starting high school, but so she's there for a while without going back to high school, and it's just kind of about her coping with her dad's death and kind of all the pieces that go into that.
And trying to make friends in this new place. And
so that's another theme in all three of the books we realized, too. All the girls are new girls. All the girls have moved. And so I moved the first time when I was in 6th grade, right after 6th grade. And then I moved the second time right after 9th grade, which puts me closer to Davy's age.
Right.
So I was moving for the second time.
Right.
And I moved from from Philly at that time to South Florida. So it was another huge culture shift. So even though it's not exactly the same, it's this culture shift. And I didn't like it where I was, you know, like I had a whole shift in family dynamic, and I didn't like where I was. Like I saw the beach, which I really liked, but anyone who's ever spent time in South Florida, it's just a unique place. It's a lot of transplants, and anytime you have like beach or tourist culture, it's hard to really develop a like kind of local culture. And I definitely think that's changing. My mom's been there for like probably over 20 years now, right, Mom?
Yep.
And it's definitely, there's more spots. I mean, it's developing, sure, and getting more conscious. But, yeah, so Davy, I liked her because she was the most, I felt, introspective character. Like, and she was really compassionate. Like,
she's the oldest of the characters.
She is the oldest of the characters.
Yeah. But she definitely was the most, like, questioning in terms of questioning the adults, you know.
Authority.
The authority.
Why do I have to follow your rules? You didn't ask me when you made them. I say that. Every time I get a parking ticket. You did not ask me.
Question, and maybe this is jumping the gun. What was her mom's involvement after, like, her dad was shot?
So her mom and her brother were out shopping, like for school clothes for the brother when the dad got shot. And what you end up learning is he dies in Davy's arms. Like, she's out with her boyfriend, like a new love. And early on in the story, there's a moment where he comes to see her, and he just starts crying, and they have this tender moment on the beach, and he goes to kiss her, and she can't kiss him because the memory of kissing him and having that emotional, good sexual feeling is totally juxtaposed with that night. And because the last time she felt that, they heard the shots. They were on the beach, and they heard the shots, and they just ran. Yeah, and it's interesting because we talked about how none of these characters are really shamed sexually. There is this invitation to sort of explore your body and stuff, but I would say Davy's is the closest to it, and it's not shaming, but it's she doesn't, she has the conflict of not being able to enjoy the positive moments of adolescence because this tragedy has now struck.
Right. She can't separate.
And she can't separate. And then the mom is just...
Well, they moved to New Mexico because the mom needs help, basically.
She needs support.
She needs the support of the family to help with the kids so that she can sort of grieve.
Fall apart. I mean,
fall
she
apart.
needs to, like, just...
And she does fall apart.
They're high school sweethearts. The mom and dad were high school sweethearts who got pregnant. It's like a total modern-day real-life story. Like, and the dad could have been an all-star basketball player, but all you hear about is their love and had the kids and making it work. You hear the uncle who, so then this becomes one of the conflicts. So talk about subversive. You've got all these issues around violence and like gun control.
Right.
And our just cultural relationship to violence. And so Davy has this moment where she calls out her uncle who works building bombs, who they won't let her do driver's ed, and they won't let her, what's the other thing?
She wants to ride the bike without a helmet.
Oh, she doesn't wear a helmet on her bike. She's got a couple things.
Right.
And they're like, it's so unsafe, it's so unsafe. And she's like, dude, you build bombs. Like, you can't sit here and tell me I can't take driver's ed because getting in a car is unsafe, and then you go to work every day and build bombs to keep us safe.
Right.
Like, meanwhile, my dad just got shot to death minding his own business, just working in our store, you know, and like, it's so that's part of her, the Davy character, you know, like asking the questions and so then,
well, and there's a lot of racial conflict in that book too, because the people who work at the lab who are more in like the maintenance positions are Mexicans. Are they Mexicans or are they Native Americans?
There's both.
They're both, but they're both.
I'm looking for that page where she's at school.
They're both. I forget what they call them in the book.
I know, I'm looking for it.
But they're essentially brown people. And so the whites who are in...
And they're like local, essentially.
Yeah,
like all these white people have come because they have PhDs to create this think tank of a town.
Right.
And
so all the white people live in one segregated neighborhood up on this hill.
Okay.
And and they even call it the hill. Don't they call it the hill?
The stomps. The stomps dress in 10-gallon hats and cowboy boots. Coneheads, jocks, loadies. But I don't know where they talk about. Yeah.
But anyway, there's all of this tension between the whites and the non-whites that Davy is just kind of like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like they go into one of the towns in New Mexico to shop for Christmas, and she's like really into it. Like it's all decorated out with like all this Latin culture and lights and everything, and she's really into it. And she's with her aunt and uncle, right? Or is she with friends? I forget.
She's with the rich girl.
With the rich girl friend.
She has this like rich girl friend that lives on Bathtub Row, which is like this exclusive part of town.
Because the houses were built with bathtubs.
Oh.
Yeah. But the parents are like, something about, oh, it's dirty. Like,
right.
I forget exactly the details, but the parents were like, oh, make sure you lock the door. Oh, just hold your bag closer to you. Like, they're just all paranoid being in this part of town that isn't the white part of town.
It's a really interesting commentary, too, on just, like, this idea of being street smart versus being book smart, or being, like, in this way that we culturally accept certain types of knowledge and understanding. And when you're 15, she turns 15 in the book, but when you're that age and you are explorative and you do have the questions because of what you're seeing and experiencing, like, it seems so clear that people have kind of the wrong idea, and like this guy we were talking about this earlier, her uncle, who just presents this like scientific mind, but he also, I think, really kind of represents like the patriarchy and capitalism and these just dominant ways that you just fall into the system and follow, all the rules that were set up for you to follow to be, a successful human being. And like, it's all just a bunch of bullshit. It's total bullshit. And Davy is calling that out. And I mean, and she's even calling her mom out and being like, you know, what are you doing? You're not even participating in our lives anymore. Like, but there's also a couple parts where she's like really compassionate too. Like there's a moment she catches her mom in a really emotional moment looking at pictures, and, you know, and this is where Judy Blume is so, I think, so, again, like conscientious with her writing. She tells you what Davy's thinking and feeling, so you get into the character, you know? Like, and Davy says to herself, like, I try to remember that this is really hard for my mom too, you know? Right. Or like, so you don't, so many times teenagers, especially in the real world, we were talking about, one of the things I commented on earlier was that the great thing about young adult literature, just in general as a genre, is it gives teenagers a voice, and it tells this teenage story, this youth story. Yeah, Larissa is a teacher, so Larissa teaches public high school in Chicago, like charter school, but still, yeah, charter school. And she teaches documentary. She does a lot of documentary work, so you're guiding kids into telling stories and saying to them, like, your story is important and okay, you know, and we all of us here actually do stuff around telling stories and sharing that. And, you know, teenagers just totally always get this bad rap, you know? And so it's nice to, like, have this character, Davy especially, I mean, all of the characters, but Davy especially, who, like, Judy Blume is really honoring her voice, her feelings, her story. There's a moment I wanted to talk about, again, just being subversive and things that, like, I'm a person who really pays attention to and even studied looking at girl characters. And so there's a moment where Davy gets the bike for the first time. She goes out riding. She had been hiking in the canyon in tennis shoes and got blisters, and somebody was like, you got to get a good pair of hiking boots if you're going to live here. So she goes, and she's just riding the bike, and she stumbles upon the store, and they're having a sale, and she finds this pair of hiking boots on sale, and she's like, in her head, she has this whole, this wouldn't be a practical purchase, and she remembers a time in New Jersey being at the mall school shopping and seeing this girl just loaded down with clothes, and she was like, oh, I'm going to college, and she says all this. She has this whole moment about remembering, oh, what it must be like to have enough resources to just buy yourself the clothes you need, you know? And so in New Jersey, hiking boots aren't practical. You know, she lives at the beach, but she's here now, and she wants to experience this world she's in, and she wants to have a certain experience. So in order to have it, she makes a choice for herself. She buys herself, and she uses her own money, and, like, she values the things she needs in the moment for her own self-care, for her own, you know, way of just living her life now. Like, and I was telling Jana, I just interviewed Jennifer Reeder. I think she's at the Jennifer Reeder. She's a filmmaker here in Chicago and a professor at UIC, and she made this great short film about girls. And one of the things she talked about was this right to a self-determined life. And I just thought that was so eloquently said. And when we're talking about girls especially, we think about, like, what is going on with the culture of girls in the world today. You know, like, these 200 plus girls were just kidnapped from a school in Nigeria. Just kidnapped. Like, they don't even have the option to live their life now. And, like, nothing, I mean, hopefully they're in there making some kind of choices and whatever, I mean, you know, but, and so even though, and this is a very different experience, you know, certainly it's got privilege all embedded in it and race issues and that and whatnot, but nonetheless, you have this 15-year-old girl with, you know, her own earned money in her pocket saying, I'm going to buy these shoes that will help me
climb a mountain.
Climb a mountain, yeah, literally and figuratively, and I'm not going to feel bad about it, you know?
Right.
So, and like I was saying to Jana, like, the book wasn't about buying hiking boots, you know, it was like, oh, maybe a total of like 4 sentences.
Right.
So, like, how I like, that's just so the power of a story and writing and just all these moments.
I think the moms' characters are interesting. Like, both the moms seem to have left their fathers, so they're like these disjointed families where the mother's sort of the central role of raising the children. So I'm wondering, like, do they do you feel like they're strong characters in the book, or are they shown as more sort of weaker? You say they moved in with the uncle and he sort of runs the family, but to me, I take it as them being really kind of strong figures.
Yeah, well, so glad you bring that up. Because even in my research with film, this is something that I've observed, which is that a lot of time in teen stories, female-driven teen stories especially, which is what I specifically look at, there is a disconnect with the mother. And preach, mom, true life, right? I wanted nothing to do with my mother at that age. And she was like cool with it. She was like, yeah, you're no picnic either, sister. See you in 5 years. And I actually did move in with my dad because my mom was relocating, and I was like, well, how about I go live with dad and we try that out, and that. So I get a conflict because I do think it's very true, and it makes sense. I think, for whatever all the gender, cultural, whatever dynamics of just mothers and daughters, but then, there's just a reality, I think, to anyone you always have this rebellion to any authority that you're close to, But I do notice that in these stories, a lot of times you have disconnected mothers. Like, even if you look, The Hunger Games is a big story right now. The mom is totally mentally checked out. She's destroyed by the death of the father.
Right.
And what it does that is problematic, not a negative, but just problematic, is that it elevates these fathers to this like hero status, and these fathers are the things the girls are looking up to, but the fathers aren't actually doing anything. I mean, they did in life, but now it's this mythical, it's like when you break up with that guy and then you're single forever and you're like, oh, that was the best relationship of my life. No, it wasn't. Not to say that your dads aren't great men, but they were flawed too. But you're now living and seeing and experiencing all your mother's flaws. And I look back at that age of me and my mom now, and especially as I got into my early 30s and I started thinking about, wow, I'm the age now that my mom was divorced with 2 kids, one who was basically a bitchy fucking little teenage girl. And I'm like, oh my God, mom, and we're in a totally different, our relationship, but like, of course you get this different awareness, but the danger of it for the messages the girls are ingesting is you only see the conflict with the mother, you only see the distance with it, and then
well, it's like father, but the men aren't even, they're absent. They're
and they are absent.
And the blame goes to the moms.
And
even though, just trying to raise the children by themselves. And really it's the fact that there's these absent fathers. Yeah.
So I will say in all of these stories, the mother characters, there was, like, Tiger Eyes especially. So the mom ends up getting in therapy and getting together. And Davy actually goes to see the therapist at least once in the book. And the therapist is the one who helps her kind of realize she's angry. Right. And that was another great moment. Right. Where she's like, the therapist is like, well, you have a right to be angry. I mean, like, if someone shot my father to death, I'd be angry. And Davy, it's the first time Davy kind of realizes, oh yeah, I mean, I knew I was sad, but yeah, I'm angry too. And she thought she was kind of angry at her mom and this and that. And so that's another bigger moment. But the mom ends up like taking Davy out to dinner and being like,
They reconcile.
And she's just straight with her. And that's another, I think, moment of adulthood, right? Now it's, now I'm sitting with my mom as a friend and a peer and someone who is valuing my opinion as another woman in the world. And
yeah, because they share equally what they were feeling about the death of the father, and their grieving process. Right. And the mom even says, yeah, I pulled away from you because I was afraid that you would ask me questions that I couldn't answer. So they reconcile. And so I actually, of the 3 books we read, I think the mom character is the strongest in Tiger Eyes.
Definitely. Yeah, so. Okay. I suppose it's time. What?
It's Margaret's time.
What was your
I was
question?
going to say, did she end up riding a bike by the end of the book?
Oh, yeah. She wrote the book from the beginning. Yeah, Larissa's big into bike culture. Yeah, she rode the bike from the beginning without her damn helmet, which I do.
Oh, and they go back. So Davy and her mom reconcile, and then at the end of the book, they're moving back. They're going back home.
They go back to Atlantic.
So, yeah.
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 All right. Are you there, God?
It's me, Margaret.
It's
me, Jana.
It's me, Alicia. It's all of us. We're all here.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
I kind of, I don't know if this is where we should start or not, but one thing that I do think is interesting about Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And this cover is so random with the toenails.
Seriously.
They don't even talk about like pedicures.
No.
Most of these are like the new generic covers, but I like the simplicity of them. I especially like the bindings. But my Margaret had her on the cover.
Yeah.
I remember she had
Right,
like brown
too.
hair, kind of had the illustration.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is interesting about just the God part of this book is even though she's exploring religion and even though it's kind of unidentified, she assumes the norm. Like she assumes it's a man because at one point she says she genders it. And there's still the whole praying process. And there's, so I just, which I don't think is a negative. I just think we are kind of normalized to think.
Honestly, as like rereading it as an adult, I definitely was curious about, because what you come to toward the middle of the book is her dad is Jewish and her mom is Christian.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. And it's dad's mom is grandma.
Right. And so her parents are super intent on, like, she's not raised religious. She's nothing. And they say that to her and around her. Like, Margaret is nothing. She's no religion.
I gotta go.
She's nothing. Yeah, she's nothing. And yet, so they don't teach her anything, but yet she somehow, on her own, decides that she wants to pray. It's never introduced in the book as to, like, where she gets that idea. It's very unclear. She just all of a sudden is praying, which I thought was really interesting.
Can you recap the story a little bit? Because I know it's been a little while. Little 20 years.
So Margaret is an only child, and they move from New York City, right?
Yes.
To New Jersey.
Right.
Okay.
Which in this case is not physically a far cry, but it's
Culturally.
yeah.
Yeah, and so Margaret befriends the girl down the street from her, and it's right before school starts. And
it's 6th grade, right?
It's 6th grade.
So for me, in this book, though, for me, 6th grade was the beginning of middle school, and in this book, they start middle school 7th grade.
They're still in elementary school.
Yeah, so it's kind of they're the big shots of the school, but they're prepping for next year.
Exactly. Yeah. And the girl down the street from her, like, takes her under her wing and is like, okay, on the first day of school, don't wear socks.
Oh, right.
And we're going to have a secret club, but you won't be allowed to be in it unless you're not wearing socks.
Is anybody wearing socks today?
No. Yeah, girl, we're in the club.
What's the name of the club? I don't even remember.
PTSs. The
Preteen Sensation.
Oh my God, it is.
PTSs.
I love it.
So it's just her experience basically navigating school, and there's a girl in the class, Laura Danker, who is tall and busty, and she's like more developed than all the rest of the girls, and the PTSs come up with these rules that they all have to abide by, one being they have to wear a bra. And whoever gets their period first has to report to the group and tell us all about it, all the details, including what it feels like. And you have to keep a boy book where you list in order the boys by how you like them. And so, yeah, they just go to school and they have their club, and, you know, it's just, woo!
Party time!
Brunch!
Well,
Okay.
I have to declare that
I didn't think we should
I
do
actually
that.
got my period in Ocean City, Maryland, in an outdoor shower.
Oh.
How old were you?
I was in 3rd grade.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that feels early.
10.
No.
I was like 10, but I was old, so I was 10.
You said you were old. You
That's
were tall?
early.
Oh, I was older in the class.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
still
So
10.
it's usually like 5th grade. So
No, third. No, I was third. I was 9. I was 10. So
10, I think, is 4th grade.
okay, I was in the 3rd, 4th split class.
Okay.
So that's probably why.
Because then 11 is 5th grade, 12 is 6th grade.
I guess I always like do 2 ages for each grade because I always turn into the middle.
Yeah, me too.
Oh.
I'm November.
Well, I'm a July baby, so I was the same age for school year all my whole life.
Well, so how old were you?
When I got my period, I
Yeah.
was 12, and I was like, "What?" If all the girls were being honest, I was one of the last ones.
Yeah, I think I was one of the last 2.
How old were you?
I was 12, I think going on 13 though, but it was 9th grade for me because my birthday was in November and I like started school early. So I was like,
You were 12 and freshman year of high
no,
school?
that's wrong, 13, 14. Yeah, no, but I was 13 going on 14 freshman year of high school. And I think I got it that summer.
I was in 7th.
Maybe I got it summer before 8th. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I forget.
Yeah.
It was March. I like remember the month. I was so excited.
Wow. Oh, right. You wanted it.
Yeah. I was getting ready to turn 13 because I turned 13 in April. So
Nice.
I was close to 13.
So yeah, so it's just basically like Margaret's experience in a new town. I mean, really like all the books are. It's just they all, Tiger Eyes had the tragedy of the father dying. Sally J had the, kind of relationship with the Holocaust and just, and she was also the youngest of the protagonists. So Margaret's right in the middle. So she probably is kind of at the most tender age, really. Because Sally was just still innocent enough. Davy was kind of smart and kind of articulate enough, like getting to that critical thinking age. And Margaret's still kind of figuring it all out.
Right.
And then the other people around her are kind of delegating how she'll figure it out. And she's seeking some help. And that's how she turns to God because nobody's told her how to have a relationship with God, but she understands it as it's something, someone I can talk to. Yeah. But she is doing the pretty typical relationship, which is she's asking for things. And she's bartering.
And the funny,
She's like, can I get my boobs? Can I get my boobs?
Yeah.
I found that so fascinating, the things that she was asking for. She was asking God to give her period and to give her boobs.
I literally said the exact same prayer. I would stare at the air vent on the ceiling, which was like a circle, and there was like vents coming in, if that makes sense. So like the middle ring around that vent was the size I wanted them to be.
Oh my God!
And I would stare at it and just beg God every night to make them that size.
Oh my God!
That is amazing.
And then all of a sudden in high school, just bam, they got really big really fast. And I was like, asking you shall receive. My cup overflowing.
You were like, I just want to say I believe in the power of prayer,
Lord
people.
Jesus.
Lord Jesus. Okay. Well, that's funny because I made that joke in the car the other day because Janet was saying how she didn't develop and she was raised very religious and like went to a religious school, and I was like, well, that just shows to show you that prayer doesn't work, and, like, but clearly not for you. Yeah, so I was the opposite with boobs, like now. So Margaret is going through all the just like kind of the obvious things, like the boobs, the boys, the period, and I do think that's another thing that's interesting about young adult lit, although I did just read another shout out, Sarah Benacasa, who's a Chicago actual comedian too. She just wrote a young adult book called Great, which is actually about two girls having a relationship. A sexual and romantic relationship, and that I have found in most young adult that's at least highly accessible, it is still kind of like heteronormative, and all these girls are white girls. Of course, they're dealing with So anyway, so I think it's just worth mentioning that this is also one kind of lens through which we're looking at adolescence,
right?
But it is very relatable, at least to a lot of the people in my circles and my communities. Because
that's because these are the books that were around when we were that age.
Right.
And so we're re-examining them now as adults, which was really fascinating.
Well, but I mean, also, like, how old are you, Krista? You're in
I'm 31.
early 30s? Okay, so we're all in our 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just wondering, because I know I talked to another friend of mine who's in her early 40s, and I think I have some girls in their 20s too. So it's a pretty broad gap still. So I wonder if girls are reading it now. Like, I have 2 teen sisters, and I don't think I gave them Margaret. I give them like feminist literature, like straight up feminist literature now that exists. But I did give Maggie, my one sister, is the one who turned me on to Sarah Dessen, who's the North Carolina author I was talking about, who it's a little more contemporary too. But anyway, back to Margaret.
Back to Margaret.
So, religion, puberty. What do you think was a more dominant theme?
Well, so what's interesting for me and my experience was, I read this book when I was probably in 4th grade, thinking that it was going to be a religious book, like a young girl exploring her relationship with God. And then what I remember from it, reading it at that age, was the puberty stuff. Like, it's more about her having to wear a bra and her period and blah, blah, blah. Then when I reread it for this, I was surprised at how much the religious stuff comes into play. Because the teacher, one of the assignments is this personal project.
Oh, yeah, and shout out to this teacher.
Right.
Like, great teacher character. Great, and a male teacher.
Yeah, he just says, you have to have a personal project, something you're working on the whole year, and then you're going to just do a report on it at the end of the year, and it's just whatever you want, it's between you and me. And he doesn't give any other guidelines. And so Margaret decides that her project is going to be religion. And she
researches it.
She researches it.
Like, nerding out here, but, like, God bless. Like, because I'm still teaching my college students how to do that.
Before the internet.
Right,
Yeah,
before the internet.
Really hard to research.
Field research, we call that.
Yeah.
Is it during this process, do her parents have any tension between, because, I mean, I relate just because I grew up with my stepmom who's Jewish and my father who's Christian or Buddhist or whatever he is, and my mom's Catholic, so a lot of different religions floating around.
It comes out in bits because you don't get it all up front. So, like, as she's exploring, it comes out that, so her mom's parents disowned her when she married her dad.
Because the dad's
Jewish. And the dad's
But he's not even, like, practicing Jewish.
He's not practicing. Neither one of them are practicing. But his mom is Jewish, and his mom is still a really strong influence in Margaret's life. And
the grandmother
character is always like, well, you're Jewish. We know you're Jewish. And then towards the end, the mom's parents come to visit. And it's this big, big blow up because the dad is like, what? After 14 years, all of a sudden it's just okay for them to come visit whenever they want. And there's a conversation with the grandparents and their parents about, well, why doesn't Margaret go to Sunday school? And she's obviously going to be a Christian, like that. You're your mother's religion, and your mom is a Christian. So
I just opinions.
And so for Margaret's personal project, she goes to different churches with like friends of hers who are
and
all
she goes to temple with her grandma.
She goes,
But it's interesting to see all but one she doesn't feel put upon. Like at temple, grandma's all, my daughter and meet rabbi, and then with the one friend at the one, I guess maybe the more, I don't know which church it was, they're like, meet the pastor and like you come back, and then there's a like non-denominational one or something, of course, one that where she just gets to like go and check it out and nobody like pushes anything on her. But at the end, she's not any clearer, like she doesn't, like that's.
So what I found really interesting was every time she goes, she's praying and asking for a sign. Like she wants to feel something when she goes to these different churches, and she doesn't. And then I think it's in a prayer where she says to God, I feel closer to you when I'm just talking to you than when I'm at any of these churches.
Yeah, that's great.
And I was
like, it's like a nod
my God.
to spirituality and not this like labeled organized religion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and it just goes back again to this subversion Judy Blume has in all her writing that is attacking these ideologies,
Yes.
but not attacking the like truths that influence them or that, you know, and something like, and I was thinking earlier about like what's hard about it is religion is definitely one of those identifiers, you know, so again, you're at adolescence when all you want to do is be labeled, like you want to be something, you know, that's why we have like cliques, that's why you have, you know, and you really, even if you're super, I mean, obviously there are those kids that are like artsy or empowered by their whatever in certain ways that they do well alone in youth, but I think developmentally, most of us are looking for acceptance and group belonging during that period, and religion is just one of those, again, big cultural places where it's, when you're that age, it's easy to be like, well, what are you?
Yeah.
You know, like.
Well, and in Margaret, the friends all say, well, everybody either goes to the Y or the, like, whatever the Christian club was. And you have to choose. Right.
It makes other people feel safer. Like, I remember standing in my kitchen with my aunt, and she had asked me, like, well, so are you Jewish or are you Christian? Yeah. And it was this moment of, like, me thinking, I don't know, why do I have to choose? Yeah. And she couldn't accept, she couldn't accept that answer at all. So I told her, I'm a pedestrian.
Okay.
Awesome.
The end.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, I remember, I mean, I grew up pretty much without religion. My mom and dad had both been raised in some element of Catholic. My mom's family is Italian Catholic. My dad's family is Irish Catholic. And they were, my dad grew up in Philadelphia, where it's a lot like Chicago. You know, the neighborhoods are kind of like ethnically and religiously, you know, segregated. So, but my parents were hippies, basically, you know, or as hippie as they could get, you know, and they, but my dad, when he got remarried to my stepmom, she was very religious. And my dad, I think, had always really, he was really raised in it, like all boys Catholic school. So, you know, that stuff imprints, and you have that guilt your whole life. And so he kind of returned to religion, which was good for him and fine. But I remember having a moment with it, and it was like 10th grade. So I was probably like 15. And I totally just had this like emotional breakdown because I got really scared that I was doing something wrong, or if it did exist. And like, that's the thing that pisses me off the most now, is this whole fear factor of organized religion, and how like the whole, I mean, and so much about our culture is driven by fear, but that you would want to scare someone into submission to participate just to uphold, again, this ideology that for the most part is bullshit. Like, you know, like has nice ideas, and there's always, I mean, morality is important, but it's malleable, you know, it's not black and white, you know. And I think that as an adolescent, that's a really hard place to be in, you know, like even like I give my students sometimes these creative projects, and they don't know what to do. They don't want to be creative. Right. They don't want to think for themselves.
They want you to tell them what to do.
Yeah, like, and so.
Well, because the creativity is not valued, you know.
Well,
like,
totally. Right, and another thing that's really great about all of these books, like Judy Blume, I think I think it's conscientious that she builds the characters that way.
Right.
It's funny because, you know, you said you related most to the character in Tiger Eyes, and like revisiting Margaret and like thinking back on reading that, I have to say she's probably the one I most identified with. Yeah. Because both of my parents were raised Catholic, but growing up they didn't see it as very important, and they kind of allowed me the freedom to choose kind of like her. And you said she was going to different churches with her friends. It must have been a blueprint for my life. Like, I'm not even remembering that she did all this, but I did it too at those ages. Like, and where I grew up was kind of like Bible Belt Southern. Right. So like, I was going to Baptist churches and Pentecostal churches, and I was watching people speak in tongues.
Yeah.
And then I was going from there to Catholic church, and just there wasn't like a large Jewish presence or anything like that. But any type of different religion that I could go to, I went to see what it was all about. I remember making my mom take me bra shopping even when I didn't need it, and like praying to God for it the way that she does. I'm like, I must have read this and decided. I don't know if I read it and decided this is how I should live my life, or if I just was already that way, and the book kind of helped me along with that. I don't know.
Well, that's what I think. That's what I was going to say. Your experience reading the book is interesting, and I've heard that from a couple people that I've just been talking to about it. But when you're in it, like the moment you were of it, you know, yeah, the religion thing probably didn't stand out to you, you know, for whatever reason, probably because you were identifying more with what, the puberty and what you were going through. And I remember, like, it's funny because I was always boy crazy, still am, and I remember her thing with Moose. Like, I always remember that, and I remember the moment they, like, caught them doing the bus thing or something. And when I read it, embarrassing. But I remembered it as, like, a bigger moment from when I first read it, probably because at that time I was getting boobs, I was getting attention for them, and I felt scared by the attention. I didn't like it. Like, I felt like I didn't have control over it. Like, people were looking at me and thinking things and deciding things. And so, to transition a little bit, this time around, I really identified with the Laura Danker character, who she's a tall girl, so physically she probably looks more like you, because you're like got like 10 inches on.
I didn't get my boobs until after graduating from high school.
But you've got them now, right? What's her name? You need to give what's her name a shout out? Melissa Walters. Got them now. But so Laura Danker is the character that is tall and busty. And I was short and busty, which is kind of worse.
It is. I was tall and flat.
Right, yes. And tallness has all its own stuff going on.
Totally.
You were what?
I was just oblivious to my sexuality, I think. But I do remember my most memories were my stepmother walking around the house naked all the time. Like, and always fearful of, like, I'd bring a friend home and she'd just be walking around naked because she just was like that, very free sort of thinking. And I just always remember.
I don't like naked houses.
Yeah.
Me neither.
Yeah. I don't.
But yeah, so that I guess I wasn't aware of my body. I was more like, I think, noticing her body. So.
Well, and I was aware of my body because other people were making me aware of it.
Yeah.
Like, I had no interest in being aware of it. Like, in my head, and even in my body, I was dancing at this time. I was doing gymnastics. Like, I had a brother that all we did was play outside. I had cousins that when I saw them on the shore, you know, like, and I even have friends who have told me, like, that have known me my whole life, or, like, you know, cousins who have said, like, you've always been so comfortable in your body, like you, and I still am, you know, I'm like 35 years old, I wear hot pants walking down the city streets, I don't give a fuck, like, you're not going to mess with me, like, but, you know, the whole side note, we can talk about the way I think about it differently now, but anyway, but the boob thing, like, the being attractive to people in a way that for me, I felt like I had no control over it, so it didn't feel empowering. It didn't feel like it feels now that I'm 35 years old and I know when a guy I like is looking at me and it feels all right, you know, or it feels safe, or you know how to handle that stuff. So the one thing that happens, and this happened to Laura Danker and it happened to me, is people decide that you behave a certain way. And we were kind of discussing where that comes from. If it comes from, like, you get attention from the boys, no questions asked, and you get attention from the girls too, but in a meaner way. But the attention you get from the girls is sort of based off of the fact that you're getting attention from the boys.
Right.
And we were kind of deciding, is it the girls assuming that you do things because the boys are giving you attention, or is it the boys, you know, suggesting that you do things and the other boys not denying it, you know, like this kind of culture of silence, which I think happens to a lot of people, but adolescent boys in general, you know, there's that whole teasing that boys do. You get teased about something and you either deny it and then it's true, and you don't deny it and it's true. You know, there's all these webs of, you know, adolescent communication stuff, but I remember even in 3rd grade, and this was really before boobs, but I also, and we talked about this, I have dimples, you know, and I blonde hair, blue eyes, like I had this like cutie pie, an all-American girl look that people start commenting on from like day one. So like you hear that shit, you know. So I remember in 3rd grade, Mark Egan told everybody that we had French kissed. or somebody said we had French kissed. Everybody saw it. I had French kissed Mark Egan, and I got called a slut. 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Like, and I didn't, first of all,
You didn't know what it
if
was.
I was going to French kiss anyone, it would have been Kareem Boone, okay? Not Mark Egan, okay? Facebook, I should tell him that now. But the point is I didn't do any of it. And then it just, things like that just kept happening. And I just didn't want anything to do with boys. And so Laura Danker in the story is basically ostracized. And the girls talk about her. And Margaret is curious about her and has a moment finally where she blows up on her because she's heard that Laura Danker goes behind the A&P with Moose and some of the other boys. And
Moose is
lets them do stuff to her.
And
which-
Moose is the boy that she has a crush on.
Right. So she eventually explodes on Laura Danker because they're in a project together. And she feels like, you have boobs, you have a boy. Like, she actually admires Laura for, like, all she has. And she, like, explodes on her. And she says something about, like, I know that you go behind the A&P with the boys. And Laura's like, what? Like, who told you that? And you shouldn't believe everything that you hear, you know? And, like, and she does, it's not even, and you never even really learn more about Laura's character. She never gets developed. But they do have this moment, and Laura does stand up for herself.
Yeah.
And Margaret feels bad, and I think she apologizes even in the moment. She ends up running after her.
And this is what I find interesting because Margaret hears that from her friend Nancy. And Nancy
Who's
is
the girl
the
who
one.
said, we have to have the club, we have to, yeah.
So then there's a moment where Margaret confronts Moose. Because she assumes that Moose and the boys are the ones making up the story.
Oh, interesting.
And Moose is like, what, you
And
just
he's the
believe
one-
everything Nancy tells you?
Right.
Nancy!
So, but if we can go towards compassion for her, what we end up just talking about, and this is obviously always the truest case with the meanest of girls.
Compassion for Nancy.
Yeah. Is that they're the insecure girls.
Yeah.
Right. I know. Look,
Well,
I
just
mean-
because I had friends like that.
Of
Like,
course.
I was totally the Margaret character who would just, like, believe anything and do whatever I was told, and I was
you still
manipulated.
kind of believe it.
I resent that remark, Alicia Sullivan.
Well, you're good for jokes.
That's because I just laugh easily.
Yes, that's true. It's a good thing.
So yeah, I can have compassion for that character now, but
Sure.
Reading it.
reading it,
Yeah.
Kid.
no.
Yeah.
But I think that's what happens in real life,
It
too. I mean, people
is.
die over this stuff. You
And
know?
it's so damaging. Like, I just,
You don't know until you're older that
friends at that age, like my parents, they could tell stories of me just coming home bawling my eyes
Oh my
out
God.
day after day because of the mean girls at school.
Well, you
Yeah.
can't win at that age. This is
Right.
the other thing. And I mean, women still feel this way all the time. There's double standards in everything that we do. But you were getting teased for not fitting in, you know? I was getting teased for being what? Like too pretty or too likable or too friendly.
Right.
You know, it's like,
Exactly.
and you're just trying to be you. And like, yes, of course I have I have a little bit of a need for attention, so I'm boisterous.
A little bit.
I resent that. I've gotten better. But, you know, and like at that age, you know, it's like, yeah, you feel like you're just trying to be you. And I was the new girl a lot too. So I didn't have a role. I didn't have a history with people, you know. So then it's even, you know, you're like, well, I could just create myself too. Like, why don't I just decide who I want to be? And I actually think in my story, being the new girl and having to adjust has really helped to define my character in positive ways, you know, and I am really I'm grateful for a lot of that. And I know both of my parents have they feel strongly about it being upsetting because, you know, I moved in with my dad to stay in the area I was. My mom was in New Jersey, moving to Florida, and I moved in with my dad in Philly, and then he relocated to North Carolina. And I know my dad especially feels really bad about it because I really liked where we were in Philly, but I mean, that was also, it was at middle school, and that was where all the mean girls were. I mean, they would have been everywhere, but
Yeah. Mean girl.
But I mean, again, it goes back to we're taught that women are the enemy, you know, and that manifests in such a young age. And girls are taught to be relationally aggressive, you know, whereas, you know, boys are taught to be physical. I mean, you see it with boys; they'll get in a fist fight and still be friends, like you know. God, I wish. Sometimes I wish I could just punch someone and be like done with it, you know, right?
Yep.
So. What do you think that was your biggest takeaway from Margaret, either this time or the first time around? Or
I really resonated with her religious struggle this time around.
yeah,
And she says toward the end, I don't know if she's talking about her grandma or somebody else, but it just she says, well, if I love her, what does it matter what religion I am?
yeah,
And that really kind of like encapsulates it all for me personally, because my personal journey has been much more of a personal spiritual discovery separate from the way I was raised. And the way that I was raised is a lot of, well, Christians do this and Christians don't do this. And if you don't do this, you're not a Christian. And if you do this, then you are a Christian. And it was either or, a lot of this either or business.
it always is, and I think it's the same thing with being a woman. You know, girls do this, girls don't do this,
right?
You know, and we define ourselves by defining against something else.
Right.
You know, like even like, you know, feminist studies teaches you to disrupt that idea of just a binary or just of defining woman based on how she compares to man. You know, and that's even what biology teaches us. And like, yes, there's a science to it. That is true, but like culturally, like we keep just reinforcing these behaviors and ideas and customs that really have nothing to do with our nature, you know. You even said earlier, like nature versus nurture, because you felt this draw to being the feminine, like nobody explicitly told it to you. But we're getting all kinds of messages and things that aren't explicit all the time, that aren't just connected to our biology, you know. And so like, you know, that the idea of things being natural is always a little tricky, I think. But it's a way we understand to say things too, you know, because language is so flawed too. And I think that's another reason young adult is so great, because it is simply written, you know. So there's not a lot of, you know, for lack of a better term, there's not a lot of time wasted on like elaborating on the concepts or building this dramatic story. It's just kind of, and I really like that in, I think, a lot of the art I consume. Even I watch films that are just character-based stories. You know, I love television shows where like I watch it for season after season because every character is so unique and interesting, and it's just the little flaws of being human, you know. And I think young adult has a lot of potential to access those things in really like easy to consume ways. Yeah. Not just for teens. No. So yeah, and I write for a blog called Love You Lit. Love You Lit, YA, not just for teens. And we're gonna put the podcast up on there, and I'd like to do a little written review of the books. We'll get on that. And yeah, so let's plug some things. What do you have to say? Blog? We said it at the beginning a little bit.
I blog.
Talk about your ebook.
Oh yeah, I just published an ebook a couple months ago. It's called How to Manage Depression Without Drugs. And it's my personal journey of dealing with depression and also subsequently a diagnosis with multiple sclerosis. And I have chosen to not take drugs. So just kind of how I cope and what I do to stay healthy without taking drugs, which is subversive.
Totally. And I will be writing the follow-up to that book, How to Do Drugs Without Depression. Oh, God.
Let me edit that one.
We are cousins and BFFs. So, yeah, and again, Chicago, I've got a show Monday night at Zany's. I'm going to be telling my boobs story, I think. I'm going to tell my boobs story. And Thanks for tuning in. At Marga Pictures on Twitter.
Thanks for brunch.
At FunnyLady419. Krista Atkinson performing all around town.
Thursday
Just sticking around.
Just sticking around.com.
Thursday nights at Hydrate. In and
First
out?
and third Thursday of every month,
Right.
Hydrate. Second Thursday of every month, Parlor. Fourth Thursday of every month, the Hall Sticks.
Wow.
So just check out the website,
Just listen.
like the Facebook
Just
page.
sticking around Thursdays.
Yeah.
You have to
like our Facebook page, and you'll see where we're at each week.
Yeah. We'll put all this up on the Facebooks, and hope everyone enjoyed tuning in. Thanks, Mom. She logged off a little bit ago, but it was great to have her here.
Thanks for having me co-host.
Yeah, super fun.
Thanks for breakfast.
Yeah, breakfast,
Cheers.
brunch, Judy Blume,
Cheers.
young adult love.
Cheers.